Meet Siddharth, a true petrol head with a heart deeply attuned to the rhythm of cars. For him, every car is a masterpiece, a harmonious blend of design and mechanics. He perceives the subtleties in their design language, feels the intricacies of their driving dynamics. His collection of showroom catalogs and scale models is a testament to his devotion. More than just vehicles, Siddharth sees his cars as stories of innovation, passion, and artistry. In a world that often races by, he takes a moment to truly admire the beauty and soul of automobiles, celebrating their legacy and future with unmatched enthusiasm. I present to you Siddharth Shankar. So, what sparked your interest in automobiles and how did your passion for cars evolve over the years?
See, what really started was I inherited this through my dad,
Okay.
and we used to own a Padmini that time, this old Fiat Padmini that we used to have it, right? So we had one in 1981 and then we had another one in 1994.
Okay.
So since he was a busy man in his office and always used to talk about maintenance, about engines, about gearboxes, this and that, so that's what sparked interest in seeing a lot of Marutis, lot of 118 MEs, even saw Rover Montegos back in those heydays of the early 90s that were plying on Delhi's roads. Plus, of course, when I started to read magazines, Auto India was a very, that was a very primarily selling magazine, started in 1993. Then I started to see the new Zens coming out from the showrooms, and my everyday job was to simply top up the water on the radiator of the Padmini because I was not an S1 model. Ours was before the S1. The S1 had the thermostat control cooling system with the coolant. So it didn't have this water cooled
Okay,
this
okay,
thing.
okay. I was about to ask you कि क्या every day क्यों डालना पड़ता था उसके
Yes,
अंदर?
because it was not an S1, it was an old school water cooled
Radiator.
radiator. So I had to top up the water every day before that went to office, and after he came back, so every morning I just used to check the water level. And of course, he used to take me to the showrooms, and whenever the car used to get serviced, like Rama Sangi or Premnath Motors, so I used to see the mechanics working on the car, tuning the carburetor, plus setting the jets, and those who have owned Padminis must be knowing that how sweet that car sounded on the stock exhaust. So the
Sure.
sound of the exhaust, plus my second Padmini, it had the 118 gearbox. It was so slick. It was a Nissan direct gearbox. So I learned driving at the age of 13 actually. So
Okay.
that kept on sparking bigger interest on the automobiles. So driving and then learning to maneuver around the cars and learning to see others what were they doing and what all cars were coming out of the showrooms. It was mostly dominated, of course, by Maruti. And then after 1998, 1998 was the time when the interest just skyrocketed because I went to the Auto Expo and that time the Indica was getting unveiled. So that was a very big moment for the automotive industry of the country.
Was that the first auto expo?
No. The Auto Expo started way back in the 80s.
Oh,
Yes, 80s. So before 98, 96 was when the Safari was getting unveiled. Then in 94 also it happened. We had seen lot of good, I would say good cars, because if I take you to the history of the Indian automotive after the economy opened, uh, in the 70s, we were only having the ambassador, the Hindustan Motors and Premier Automobiles that were making the cars in the country. So we were 30 years back then also because the government was controlling the industry. It was called the license Raj, where you were controlling the production of the vehicles in the factory. And the same was with the two-wheelers also. So you were basically controlling the production and economy was not that much good. So there was a waiting period on the car. So the average waiting period was 3 to 5 years that time. So I studied a lot about the history. So uh, the history of our country, I would say, has been pretty dubious. The classic car enthusiast would not agree with this, but it has been dubious because of in the 70s we had some great American cars, European cars, but
Correct.
India was just relying on what were the designs of the 50s being recycled and scrapped onto the factories till the 90s. So the first time the economy opened was in the 1983 when Maruti came in with the Suzuki Motor Corporation. Then after that, Standard also was there. Standard Herald was there. So in the late 80s, the Standard 2000 was launched. Obviously, it had the power steering and power windows plus a sunroof also, if I'm not mistaken. Plus, it had the interior, which was 20 years ahead of what India had seen. But then 4 kpl mileage was costing about 5 lakh rupees or something. Shitty Vanguard engine. So it was a British car at the end of the day. Ambassador was also a British car, Morris Oxford. Plus then Sipani was trying to make big inroads into the market. They had the Montana, the 3-door Montana, then they had the Badal, they had the Dolphin. They were all based on discarded Reliant vehicles, again from the British era. And then they came up with, if you talk, okay, so the 91 finance minister Manmohan Singh and Narasimha Rao, they opened the economy. So that was a golden era for our industry. At the time when Honda was making a legendary car like the NSX that you see here in the 90s, we were coming out in the modernity. So that was when the modernization of the automobile industry started. So the 800 was the Suzuki Alto or the Fronte, the Japanese Fronte. So that was far more ahead of what you had seen on the Indian automotive industry. Like it had an overhead camshaft, plus it had a synchro mesh gearbox, plus a modern hatchback like look, and based on a front wheel drive monocoque platform. Far more reliable, far more durable, far more fuel efficient. So that was what started the revolution. Even if you remember, the ladies also started to drive the Maruti 800.
And you just mentioned, apart from the revolution you just mentioned, I think this was the part where you mentioned that your interest in automobiles in general also started skyrocketing.
Yes. The first time it started was obviously by seeing the car, by seeing the Padmini. I used to maintain it, and when I started reading the magazines, then that front road that is there, somebody bought a Rover Montego way back in 1995.
Okay.
Rover Montego was something which sparked my interest. It was a big luxurious car costing about 9 lakh rupees. Sunroof was there. The wagon had the had a self-leveling suspension. The station wagon was also there in that.
Plus self-leveling suspension at that time.
Yes. Plus power steering, power windows, and it had a 2-liter turbocharged diesel. Right.
Okay.
So seeing that car in front of my house, I mean, it was something different. I thought, कौन सी imported गाड़ी आ गई? But then again, after a long time, I came to realize again it was a discarded British car made by Sipani at a chicken farm kind of a factory. Reliability issues were there. But then 2-liter turbo diesel with 90 HP was a big thing for the 1990s, for the early 90s for the Indian market.
Thing. It was a huge thing, I'm sure.
And then I started to see the telco vehicles, the Tata Sierra, the Tata Estate, and the Tata Mobile. In fact, my dad was in an FMCG company.
Okay.
So I used to tour a lot in the Uttarakhand belt and even some belts of Punjab and Haryana. So he had this Tata Mobile pickup, Tata 206 in the shade of blue. So we used to have this Tata Mobile 206, the pickup. So I used to travel a lot on that vehicle.
Okay.
It was a single cab version or the crew cab. So me and dad used to travel on those vehicles across the hills. And that was when we started to see these telco lines. It was a workhorse that time. Plus then after that I started to learn more about the Mahindra vehicles also. Mahindra had the Commander, the CL 550, the Marshall was there, Marshall DX 2000, Marshall Royale, and even that time there was a van. It was called the Voyager. Yes, a very luxurious Mitsubishi L300 based van that had the Peugeot 2.5-liter diesel engine from the Armada. Armada made me very crazy. For what reason? It used to look something different, especially when you look at the wheels. It had something like this conical hubcap that popped out, which used to indicate it was a 4-wheel drive.
Right, correct.
And before that,
in the front.
Yes, and before that, there was a vehicle made by Mahindra. It was called the Quadro. So not many people know about the Quadro.
Okay.
What unique thing about the Quadro was it was a basic MM550, the two door. But it was way back in 1994 or 95. I'm talking about. They launched something called as a customization. You could choose from your own set of wheel design, dashboard, lights. I mean, it was kind of a customization program. You can tailor make your own vehicle. So Quadro was obviously a failure because it was too ahead of the time from what we were learning about. And then way back in the 1998, when you only had the 800 and Zen, and then Esteem came in, the 1000, the Esteem. Those were the semi-luxury cars. Then silently Ford had the Escort, Opel had the Astra costing 7 lakhs, Escort was costing 6 lakh rupees. Daewoo had the Cielo, which made a splash in the market. So luxury cars started to come into the market after the opening of the economy, right? So all of them were in an alliance with some of the Indian companies. Like General Motors had an alliance with, I think, some tobacco maker, I don't know the name. And Ford had with Mahindra, Daewoo had with Delhi Clock Mills, DCM. So they entered into some alliance and they started to make some modern cars in the market. So carburetors were on their way out. And fuel injection systems were beginning to make inroads into the market without knowing that our fuel was not good enough for those fuel injectors, which used to get choked and clogged, and every time they used to require servicing because of the too much of the petrol had adulteration. Even today it continues to have that. So seeing those modern cars with streamlined designs, the Escort was an ugly looking car, of course. Cielo had a very large looking streamlined Russian car looks, plus the power antenna at the back.
That was something. That was quite something.
Quite something. And all of a sudden,
I think apart from Cielo, even Accent
came in later. Accent came in much later.
Okay.
But at the same time, you go to the Rajpath and you're seeing a W124 coming by. Mercedes-Benz. Mercedes-Benz that time was considered to be Maharaja product. Even though the company launched the 124 at a time where it was replacing the 124 with the 210 worldwide. So kind of a discarded product for India. They were assembling it at the Telco factory in Pune. But then that car used to cost north of 20 lakh rupees. So it was a very big deal back then.
I'm sure.
Yes, it had the petrol 220 and the diesel, the 5-cylinder diesel 250 diesel. So that was a tank, proper tank, like one of the last old school mugs that were ever built to last forever. Even people today, you must be knowing, own and run the vehicle.
Right.
So Mercedes was the large sahab of the Indian automotive landscape. And even you could see a few of the W123s, the older ones, the 116, the 118, those vehicles, they were also flying in Delhi. That was a golden era for us. And at the same time, modern era was just beginning to creep in, like the Auto Expo, like I told you. Tata had started to tease about the Indica big time. The magazines were covering that car like crazy. Before that, the Safari was launched. Safari was like a Pajero for us, a very modern Pajero costing 8.5 lakh rupees. And then in between, you remember the Sumo. The Sumo was in 3 years, 1 lakh units were sold. That was a super successful vehicle for Tata. Sumo was there.
And I think till date, अब तो खैर उतना नहीं है, but आज भी there are some places in the remote areas where Sumo or you call it Spatio अभी भी वो
बिल्कुल
rebuild होके चलाते जा रहे.
It goes on forever. Sumo, even Armada also people are driving somewhere, which later went on to become the Bolero. The same chassis with a different body shell. And then when you started to look at these cars, okay, so earlier there was a Santro which was launched. It had a very weird shape, like that toothy grill, that Mickey Mouse like mirror, that amber fog lights, that tall boy design, and the way it was advertised by Shah Rukh Khan. He was at its peak. Shah Rukh Khan, Kuch Kuch Hota Hai and Dil To Pagal Hai, those movies were getting smash hits. In fact, I even have the tapes of those movies here in the drawer that you see. So, The ads of those days, they could make you smile. In fact, even if you started to look at the newspapers, newspapers were full of ad wars that brought out the best on the creativity of the marketing of these companies, because they were hell bent in killing the Maruti out of the Indian landscape. Hyundai was, in fact, Mr. BVR Subbu. He clearly targeted becoming the number one by dethroning Maruti. That was how aggressive he was. So every time the Santro was launched, he had clear target to outsell the Zen. So he said the Zen has this, Zen has that, this and that and all that. Okay, so Santro was shown at the Auto Expo. Then Devo had the Matiz. So these two cars were a take on a modern passenger hatchback with a different design philosophy. So Santro was a taller looking hatchback based more on generating the vertical space, whereas the Matiz was a cab forward design based on that small dinky Daewoo D-Arts. So whatever space by stretching your body that you can take out by tightly packaging the components. That was what that design philosophy was about.
And I think they did it quite well.
Yeah, kind of. I had owned the Matiz also.
And I personally know myself, between the Santro and Matiz, I still remember I was really fascinated by the Matiz design.
Yes. In fact, it's one of that designs
it
which
was a very soapboxish kind of a design. It was just like, it's completely fitted so well.
Correct. In fact, I'm going to show you something. This Tata Nano. This has a similar concept like
Very
a Matiz,
similar,
right?
correct.
The cab forward design with the windscreen merging onto the bonnet, so you can push the dashboard forward, and then you can generate a lot of space.
Right.
Quite a lot of fascination was there. Plus, even the lights of the Fiat 500 here that you see.
Very similar.
So it was a rejected Fiat 500 design, which Daewoo recycled and launched it as the Matiz. So it was a Luciola Cinquecento concept by ITIL Design. So they bought that design from Giugiaro and they launched it. So it was a very successful car, but not in India. Worldwide, yes, they were exporting from here also. Obviously, those who have owned Daewoo's must be knowing why it happened because of the company's stupid way of operating in the country. But then the car that there were two cars that made splash in the in that year. One was the Honda City, one was the Mitsubishi Lancer, and then came the Tata Indica. The amount of hype that Indica generated. Obviously, you must be remembering they were showing off ads like the end of the year, the end of the small car, and small cars would feel small, this and that. They were showing that 1.4 liter engine was a big engine, right? 1,15,000 bookings were there. In the middle of in the middle of the decade, I blatantly recall Fiat and Peugeot, they came in the country, and how Premier Automobiles, it killed both the brands within a span of few days, I would say. That was a very dark side for the automotive industry. 1995, the Uno was launched with a big fanfare. So 2.9 lakh bookings that car garnered, which remains a record in today's industry. 2.9 lakh bookings is not a joke, right? As and when the government got to know about that time Maruti was controlled by Government of India. Okay. Now, if that car was a success, which it wasn't, the sales of Zen would come crashing down over the 800 also. And that would mean the income earned per car sold, because of the share of government was above 50% in that. The earnings would go drastically down. So even though it's an unrecorded history, there was a strike in the Kurla factory of Premier Automobiles where the Uno was being made. That strike lasted for about a year, more than a year. Imagine you're not making a car for more than a year, where you had 2.9 lakh bookings and only you could deliver about 3,000 cars. Right? That brand image is tarnished.
Uno was something, I still remember. It was quite a very, very unique design. I mean, I was myself fascinated, even though it had rectangle headlights
Yes.
and very squarish kind of
That was
taillights.
a Giugiaro's wedge design. So it had spoilers inbuilt on the side. It had rear fog light. It had three-piece tail lights. Plus, of course, very aerodynamic design. But
And
obviously,
it had, not to forget, a hollow headrest.
yes.
If you
And
remember.
the seat that would raise up when you pull it forward and go down when you pull it backward.
Oh.
Yeah. Obviously,
was
it
a
had
hectic
a
stuff.
1 liter carbureted engine which bogged down with the AC, so the dual barrel carburetor came in late from Mikuni. The diesel engine came in much later. The problem was the timing of Uno diesel was in June 1998. Initially it sold, but then in December the Indica came in, and Indica was priced at 3 lakh rupees for a AC diesel model, which was a lot cheaper than what the Zen and Uno diesels were, about a lakh cheaper. So that was a lot of amount for a middle class family that time. Because car penetration even today is 8 in 1,000. That's how low it is. And that time it was 3 or 4 in 1,000. So people were rushing madly to Tata telco showrooms, booking the Indica. Obviously, the maximum bookings was for the diesel AC model, the DLE model. Petrol was launched at 2.5 lakh rupees, but that was only a non-AC model, just targeted at someone who just wants a cheap model. But then again, it was a 1.4 liter engine, not very efficient. And their strategy was to make diesel Indica mainstream. The top model of the diesel was 3.9x showroom, which was very cheap for it had each and every creature comfort possible. Rear power windows, you had the rear fog lights, you had the tachometer. Even if you look at the design of the car, the design was very modern. Obviously, it was made by I.DE.A idea, the same design house that designed the Palio. So you could find a lot of similarities with the Palio in terms of the design also in that vehicle. And of course, the hype generated by journalists, they did say that the car could have been better engineered because it was all a mishmash of parts from here, parts from there. It was a learning curve for telco that time.
But I think Indica was a pretty well designed vehicle.
It was a successful
It was an
vehicle
Italian
also.
design, if I'm not wrong.
It was an Italian design. Very comfortable. Obviously, it had a lot of shelf spaces also if you sit on the inside.
Right.
The dashboard had a large glove box, plus there was a shelf above the dashboard.
Not to sound cheap, but the Jaguar XJ seems to have stolen that design.
Kind of. And there were even big pockets on the doors. And even for entertainment seekers, you had two 6.5-inch speaker pads on the door, plus on the front 4-inch speakers you could fit it. So the sound stage, whatever you wanted.
Yes, I still remember that. Correct.
That could have been very good for the audiophiles. But that was a very golden era. 98, 99, 2000, and 2000 started the revolution of the mid-sizers. Icon, the Accent, the Corsa came in. Then you had the Cities, the Lancer. Then Maruti started to launch cars in a hurried manner. The Wagoner came in Christmas of 99. Same way the Baleno came in Christmas of 99. And then the new millennium started to end all those old vehicles with the carburetors. The Padmini was out. The 118e was out. All those old Sepanis, they were history. So we started to modernize ourselves in the year 2000. So again, we were saying fuel injection was invented in 1964 rather than the 60s. India started to get in 2000s in the mass market segment. And as and when times passed by, better cars came in, more reliable cars came in, more fun to drive cars came in. That was most important. Small cars with big engines. You had these cheap 5 lakh rupee mid sizes with big 1.6 liter engines. Then you had the Honda City VTEC, that was a legend. Then you had the on the high side, you started to get the Elantra, the Corolla, the Optra, the Octavia. The Skoda Octavia was a breakthrough car in 2001. It made entry luxury a success in the mass market because of its build quality. I mean, it was an unexpected success. The Octavia wasn't even marketed well, but then people started to buy that vehicle in like crazy. People were reporting 25 kmpl mileage. Very stable car, very over-engineered car it was, the Skoda Octavia. In fact, it was a Golf 4 in a Skoda body shell, right?
Correct.
And the quality of that car for that time was for us 20 years ahead of what we have seen anything. Simple reason that was MK1. Simple reason that was kind of an imported car assembled in the country. It was an SKD model, so everything was imported and then assembled here in the Aurangabad factory, like it is done till today. The paint quality, the 9 layers of paint quality.
I still remember it became a cult. It still holds that value. I
Correct.
still feel. I mean, all the Skoda owners I've seen, they still remember MK1.
The VRS of the MK1, that was legend. Performance variant, the VRS. So performance variants also started to trickle in 2002, 2003 when you had this, a lot of turbocharged engines started to come in, and then you had the segment which was a segment between the luxury cars and the entry level cars. You had the Accord, you had the Camry, you had the Sonata, you had the Mondeo, you had the Vectra, you had the C-Class. Obviously the C-Class that was launched was a disaster. It was not a reliable car that they came in. So you had Mondeo, which was a very high-tech car for its time. Like it had xenon headlights with washers and anti-breakage of the glass, plus heated front windscreen and 6 CD changer in dash, 16-inch alloy wheels, plus that time the car
that time Skoda also came out with Superb.
Superb came in 2002.
Okay.
After all these cars, that was when, because of these cars, Superb was a limousine. It was a presidential limousine in Czech Republic. So it was a B5 Passat.
Correct.
If you look at the doors of the car,
right.
Plus when you open the large rear door, it generated so much of leg space. In the magazines when they reviewed it, they said it has about as much as a legroom as an E-Class. It's a budget E-Class. That generation was not a success. The second gen that came in, that was a huge success because it was priced at 18 lakh rupees. That car in the second gen. So they literally outpriced the Accord, which was close touching 19 something. So the brand image of Skoda obviously worked against it because there were issues with the after sales service and all that. So Accord was starting to sell after the 7th gen was launched. Earlier the Sonata used to sell. But then after the Accord came in, Sonata, it never really caught up. So Hyundai's premium cars, they never really caught up. So that is how the market has behaved. And if you see over a period of time, lot of new entrants came in, Ford came in, you had Hyundai, Honda, Toyota, Nissan, Mitsubishi. Lot of companies came in, lot of good cars came, lot of good cars went. Today we are at 2023. So we are without lot of manufacturers who are operating, and where are we today is we are under the impression of I would say of an automotive doom, right? Because I am more into the old school purist cars. Today what we are seeing are all big screens, sunroof, air purifiers. इंजन में कुछ नहीं है, मतलब
बेसिकली कंप्यूटर्स ऑन व्हील्स,
कारप्यूटर्स आपको लगेगा गाड़ी भाग रही, पर आपको फील नहीं होगा गाड़ी भाग रही है.